Have you ever found yourself wondering why things don't happen when you want them to? Or why, despite all your prayers and efforts, it seems like God is taking his time to respond? That feeling of waiting for something that seems out of reach can be frustrating, challenging, and even lead us to question whether we are truly on the right path. But what if I told you that this waiting is not in vain? What if God's timing, no matter how mysterious it may seem, is actually the key to a future you can't even imagine? Yes, God has a perfect plan, a wise timing that often defies our logic, but always reveals itself as the best. In this video, we will explore the teachings of Jesus in the Bible that show us how waiting for God's timing is a journey worth taking. Please help us share this message of hope and encouragement with others who might be at their own crossroads, unsure of what the future holds, by liking, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. Ecclesiastes 3:11, Divine Wisdom in Time and Eternity. Have you ever thought about how everything in life has its perfect timing? God, in his infinite wisdom, makes everything fit perfectly at the exact time. When we look at the scriptures in Ecclesiastes 3:11, we are reminded that he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. It's as if God has given us an internal compass that constantly directs us toward him. This divine connection is what makes us seek something greater, something that transcends the immediate and the temporary. When we face difficulties, it can be tempting to doubt God's purpose, but it is precisely in those moments that we need to trust his sovereignty. Have you ever wondered why certain things take so long to happen? Maybe it's God working on something deeper, something you can't see yet, but will be beautiful in his perfect time. Often, in the hustle and bustle of daily life, we are led to want to control everything. The desire for quick results, especially when it comes to money or success, can make us forget that there is a right time for everything. Imagine a farmer who plants his seeds and expects to harvest the next day. It's foolish, right? Similarly, God teaches us that there is a time to plant and a time to harvest, and that this waiting is a crucial part of the process. Prayer and fasting are practices that can help us align our hearts with God's timing, allowing his wisdom to guide our actions and decisions. The truth is that the eternity that God has placed in our hearts is not something we can fill with temporal things. Many times, we try to quench this thirst with what the world offers, whether it's money, recognition, or fleeting pleasures. But at the end of the day, we realize that these things do not fully satisfy us. That's why we need to seek a divine connection that helps us see beyond the immediate and trust that God is in control of everything. Have you ever thought that perhaps the dissatisfaction you feel is God's invitation to something greater? A call to trust in his wisdom and the perfect timing he has established? The concept of time is something that often seems limited and linear to us. However, for God, time is a canvas on which he paints with colors that we, in our limitation, cannot fully comprehend. That's why, when we go through periods of uncertainty, it is essential to remember that God sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of all things. He turns uncertainty into confidence when we place our plans in his hands. Who hasn't found themselves anxious, wanting a prayer to be answered immediately? But the truth is that God, in his wisdom, knows the exact moment to grant what we ask, according to what is best for us. Think about how many times you've looked back and realized that something that happened in your life at the exact moment it did was crucial for your growth. Perhaps it was a job that took time to come, a relationship that needed time to mature, or even a healing that came after much prayer. All of this is part of God's plan that goes beyond what we can see or understand. God's sovereignty over time gives us deep tranquility, because we know that nothing escapes his control. Can you imagine what it would be like to live without that trust? The feeling of being at the mercy of chance without direction would be desperate. Finally, remember that trusting in God's timing is a daily exercise of faith. It's not something you do once and that's it. It's a constant choice to lay our anxieties and desires at the feet of Jesus. And when we do this, we begin to see the beauty of God's timing in our lives. After all, as the verse says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. True wisdom lies in recognizing our limitations and trusting in God's infinite wisdom. Are you willing to trust in God's timing and let Him guide the steps of your life? Leave your answer in the comments below. Isaiah 40:31. Renewal of strength through waiting on God. Isaiah 40:31 presents us with a powerful image. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. This verse is like a loving reminder that waiting on God is not passive waiting. It is purposeful waiting, where our strength is renewed. In daily life, we often feel worn out by financial worries, the constant struggle to maintain faith, or the challenges of everyday life. However, it is in the waiting that God strengthens us, like an eagle that renews its feathers before taking flight to reach greater heights. Have you ever thought that perhaps the renewal you need is exactly in what you are trying to avoid, the wait? Waiting on God is like sharpening a tool before using it. Imagine a carpenter who spends time preparing his tools before starting his work. This preparation time is crucial, and the same applies to our spiritual life. By waiting on God, we allow ourselves to be renewed by the Holy Spirit, gaining a new perspective on our problems and challenges. Spiritual renewal gives us the ability to face what once seemed impossible. When you feel tired, have you thought about taking time for prayer or even fasting, seeking this renewal? These moments of connection with God can be the key to renewing your strength and continuing the journey with confidence. Active waiting on God puts us in a position of expectation where we know something great is coming. Just as the eagle prepares to fly, God calls us to renew our strength so that we can see life from a higher perspective. When we allow this renewal, life's difficulties, which once seemed insurmountable mountains, become seen from above with the clarity of someone who is closer to God. If you are going through a difficult time, instead of giving in to discouragement, why not wait on God, knowing that He is renewing your strength so you can face it all with a stronger heart full of faith? But this renewal is not just physical or emotional, it is also spiritual. God, in His goodness, grants us the grace to run and not be weary, which means that as we face challenges, we can count on strength that does not come from us, but directly from God. It is the strength that allows us to keep doing good, even when the results seem distant, trusting that in due time we will reap the rewards. Who has never felt exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually as well? This is the moment to seek renewal in God, knowing that He is always ready to strengthen us. Waiting on God also teaches us to trust in His perfect wisdom. While we wait, we learn to see the world through the eyes of faith, recognizing that God has a purpose in everything He does. Perhaps today you are waiting for something, a response, a miracle, a life change. And this waiting can be frustrating. But Isaiah 40:31 assures us that this waiting is not in vain. It has a divine purpose. By trusting in God during the wait, we are shaped and prepared to receive His blessings in the fullest way. Patience and perseverance are the fruits that grow in our lives when we learn to wait actively on the Lord. Just as an eagle prepares to fly, God prepares us to face life renewed and strengthened. This is the promise of Isaiah 40:31, which is fulfilled when we trust fully in God and in His ability to renew us. Are you willing to wait on God, trusting that He will renew your strength so you can soar like an eagle? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how you have found renewal in the wait. Psalm 27:14, active hope and strength in waiting for the Lord. In Psalm 27:14, we find a powerful exhortation: wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. This verse calls us to an active waiting, a waiting full of faith and courage. It is not a waiting with arms crossed, but a waiting that involves patience and bravery, a waiting that strengthens us amid challenges. In many moments of life, when it seems like nothing is happening, it's easy to lose hope. But it's exactly at these times that we need to remember that God is working behind the scenes, preparing something greater. This waiting is an invitation to trust in God's timing, even when things don't happen the way we expect. Waiting on God is like training for a marathon. At first it may seem exhausting, and the results may take time to appear. But as we continue to run, even when we are tired, we begin to see our body and mind strengthening. The same happens in our spiritual life. When we choose to wait on the Lord, He strengthens our hearts, giving us the courage to face difficulties. Constant prayer and fasting are practices that can help us keep this hope alive, creating a divine connection that sustains us in the most challenging moments. Have you ever thought about how these moments of waiting can be an opportunity to strengthen your faith and prepare for something greater that God has for you? Waiting on God also teaches us to look at life from a different perspective. Often, what seems like a delay or frustration is actually God's way of teaching us something new. Perhaps He is preparing us to receive a greater blessing, or maybe He is shaping our character so that we can handle future challenges more wisely. It is important to remember that God's timing is perfect and that He knows the best moment to act in our lives. This leads us to an important question. Are you willing to trust in God's timing even when things don't make sense to you? Psalm 27:14 invites us to be valiant, to have courage while waiting on the Lord. It's not easy to wait, especially when we are anxious for changes or answers. However, this bravery is not something we need to conjure up on our own. It is a strength that comes from God when we surrender to Him in prayer and seek His presence. Jesus taught us to trust the Father even in moments of great anguish, and this example should inspire us to do the same. Instead of despairing, we can choose to wait with confidence, knowing that God is in control and that He has a plan for our lives. Active waiting on God also helps us see challenges as opportunities for spiritual growth. Every difficulty we face is a chance to strengthen our faith, to learn to trust God more, and to see life in a new light. When we wait on the Lord, our perspective changes, and we begin to see adversities as steps that bring us closer to God. How about seeing the wait not as a period of inactivity, but as a phase of preparation and growth? How have you used the moments of waiting in your life to grow spiritually and draw closer to God? Finally, waiting on the Lord is an expression of our faith in His wisdom and goodness. It challenges us to believe that even when we don't understand, God is working for our good. Trusting in God's timing is essential to living a life of peace and contentment, knowing that He is in control of all things. So what have you been waiting on God for? How has this waiting strengthened your faith and shaped your life? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Psalm 27:14 has impacted your faith journey. Galatians 6:9, the promise of future harvest. Galatians 6:9 brings us a powerful message of perseverance. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. This verse reminds us of the importance of continuing to do good, even when the results are not immediate. In today's society, where instant gratification is so valued, waiting for the harvest can seem like a difficult task, but God calls us to trust in His perfect timing, knowing that every act of kindness and every seed planted will bear fruit, as long as we do not give up. Have you ever thought about how many times you were tempted to give up when the harvest was about to arrive? Perseverance is a virtue that needs to be cultivated. Just as a farmer plants his seeds and takes care of them daily, watering, pruning, and protecting the plants, we too are called to care for our acts of kindness. Even when it seems like nothing is happening, The truth is that God is working in ways we cannot see. This is especially true when we face financial difficulties or other challenges. Continuing to do good, even when we don't see immediate results, is a sign of faith in God. Have you persisted in your actions, trusting that God will bring the harvest in due time? In our walk of faith, it is easy to become discouraged when we do not see tangible results. We may begin to question whether it is worth continuing to do good, especially when the fruits seem distant. However, Galatians 6:9 encourages us to stay focused, reminding us that God has a designated time for everything. Perhaps you are planting seeds of prayer, fasting, or even investing time in helping others and have not yet seen the fruits. But remember, the harvest will come, and it will be in God's time, not ours. And when it comes, it will be abundant and satisfying. How have you cultivated your faith during periods of waiting? Moreover, the promise of future harvest teaches us about the importance of investing in actions that have eternal value. Often, we are so focused on acquiring money, status, or recognition that we forget to invest in what really matters: God's things. When we do good, we are planting seeds that have an impact not only in this life, but in eternity. Imagine what it would be like if we all continued to do good, regardless of immediate results. What kind of world would we be creating? It is a challenge to think about how our actions today can influence the future in ways we cannot even imagine. Galatians 6:9 also invites us to reflect on the importance of community. Often it is easier to persevere when we are surrounded by others who share the same faith and values. In times of discouragement, it is vital to have a support network that encourages us to continue. God created us to live in communities so that we can help each other persevere. If you are facing a moment of fatigue or discouragement, do not hesitate to seek the support of your faith community. Who knows, a word of encouragement or a shared prayer may be what you need to renew your strength and continue planting seeds of kindness. Finally, remember that the future harvest is not just about the fruits we will reap, but also about what we are becoming in the process. Every act of perseverance shapes our character, making us more like Jesus. It is this inner transformation that makes the wait worthwhile. So how are you investing in your future harvest? What seeds of kindness have you been planting, and how has God shaped your character through this journey? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Galatians 6:9 has influenced your life. 2 Peter 3:8, God's perspective on time and his patience. In 2 Peter 3:8, we are reminded of a fascinating truth. But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. This verse challenges us to consider the difference between our perception of time and God's. For us, time is linear and often seems limited, especially when we are waiting for God to answer our prayers or intervene in our situations. But for God, time is something he sees from an eternal perspective. He is not limited by minutes, hours, or years. This teaches us to trust in God's patience, knowing that while his promises may seem delayed to us, they are perfectly synchronized with his divine plan. Have you ever reflected on how this perspective can change the way you approach the waits in your life? God's patience is not a sign of inactivity or disinterest. On the contrary, it reflects his deep love and mercy. God desires that all should come to repentance and experience the fullness of his grace. This means that often he waits the necessary time for his perfect plan to manifest, giving each of us the chance to align with his will. Imagine a scene where you are desperate for something to happen, but looking back, you realize that God's timing was essential for everything to fit together in the best way. Have you ever experienced a situation where God's wait revealed a greater purpose? In our quest for quick answers, we can become frustrated with what we perceive as God's delay. However, 2 Peter 3:8 encourages us to trust in divine patience, knowing that God's timing never fails. He is patient with us, and this patience reflects his desire for us to live in fullness with him. When we feel like things are not happening as planned, it is a reminder to turn to God in prayer, seeking the guidance of the Holy Spirit to understand His perspective. Perhaps in that process, we will discover that the delay is God's way of preparing us for something greater. Are you willing to adjust your expectations to divine timing and trust that God knows what is best? God's perspective on time also teaches us the importance of cultivating patience in our lives. In a world where everything happens so quickly, where we expect immediate answers and instant solutions, learning to wait can be a challenge. But the patience that God asks of us is a virtue that brings us closer to Him, shaping our character and making us more like Christ. Instead of seeing the wait as a waste of time, why not view it as an opportunity for spiritual growth and maturity? Have you ever considered how your life could change if you adopted God's patience in your own attitudes and decisions? God's patience also reveals His mercy toward us. He gives us time to repent, to change our ways, and to draw closer to Him. This shows us that even when we fail, God does not abandon us but waits patiently, offering new opportunities to start over. This waiting time can be a blessing, a moment to reflect on our lives and make the necessary changes. If you find yourself in a moment of waiting, perhaps it is God's time working in your heart, calling you to a deeper relationship with Him. How can you use this waiting time to draw closer to God and align your life with His will? Finally, 2 Peter 3:8 challenges us to live with an eternal perspective, remembering that God's timing is different from ours. He invites us to trust that even when we do not see immediate answers, God is in control and His promises will be fulfilled at the right time. This gives us deep peace, knowing that we can rest in God's faithfulness. So how have you dealt with the waiting in your life? Are you willing to trust in God's patience and wisdom even when things do not happen as planned? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how 2 Peter 3:8 has influenced your faith and trust in God's timing. Romans 8:28, divine providence and God's purpose. Romans 8:28 is a verse that brings great comfort and hope, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. This verse reminds us of divine providence, the way God orchestrates every detail of our lives for our good. Even in the most difficult circumstances, God is actively involved, working so that everything cooperates for our benefit. It may be difficult to believe this when we face adversity, but faith in Jesus teaches us to trust that even what seems like a disaster, God can transform into something good. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where, despite the difficulties, you realized that God was using that situation for your growth? Divine providence is a concept that often escapes our understanding, especially when we are in the middle of a storm. We may ask ourselves, how can something so painful be contributing to my good? But it is precisely in these moments that faith in God becomes essential. He, who sees the whole picture, knows how to use even our greatest struggles to shape us into the image of Christ. When we trust in His providence, we discover that we are not alone. God is with us, guiding every step of the way. Have you ever thought about how different your life would be if you truly believed that everything that happens for a greater purpose planned by God? In the midst of trials, it is natural to want to know why. However, Romans 8:28 calls us to focus on the for what. For what purpose did God allow this situation? What does He want to accomplish in me or through me? This shift in perspective helps us see our difficulties as opportunities for spiritual growth. Instead of just asking God to remove the challenges, we can ask Him to show us their purpose and give us the grace to get through them with faith. Perhaps in doing so, we will discover that God is preparing us for something that goes beyond our current understanding. Have you ever wondered what the divine purpose might be behind the struggles you are facing today? God is actively involved in our lives, ensuring that all things work together for our good. This includes not only the situations we consider good, but also those that are difficult and challenging. Divine providence assures us that nothing happens by chance. Everything is part of God's sovereign plan. That's why it is so important to keep our trust in Him, even when we don't understand what is happening. Imagine what it would be like to live with this certainty at all times, knowing that God is always in control, turning every circumstance to our good. Are you willing to trust that God is taking care of every detail of your life, even the most difficult ones? Romans 8:28 also calls us to reflect on what it means to love God and be called according to His purpose. When we live in love with God, our perspective changes. We begin to see life through the lens of faith, believing that regardless of circumstances, God is working for our good. This love gives us the confidence to move forward, even when the path seems difficult. It's like walking on solid ground, knowing that even if we stumble, God will lift us up and continue to guide us. How can this understanding change the way you face daily challenges? Finally, the message of Romans 8:28 invites us to rest in God's sovereignty. Knowing that He is in control of all things and that nothing escapes His plan gives us peace and confidence. No matter what happens, God is taking care of us, and He will turn every situation to our good. This doesn't mean we won't face difficulties, but it does mean that in the midst of them, we can be sure that God is working for our benefit. So how have you experienced God's providence in your life? Are you willing to trust that even in the most difficult moments, God is using everything for your good? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Romans 8:28 has strengthened your faith. Habakkuk 2:3, faithful waiting and trust in God's perfect timing. Habakkuk 2:3 offers us a profound lesson on the importance of waiting and trusting in God's timing. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. This verse encourages us to have patience even when it seems that God's promises are taking time to be fulfilled. In our faith journey, it is common to feel frustrated when we don't see immediate results. But Habakkuk reminds us that God's timing is perfect and that His promises will be fulfilled at the right moment. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live with this total confidence in God's timing, knowing that He never fails? Waiting can be one of the greatest challenges of the Christian life. Often we are tempted to doubt, to lose hope when things don't happen according to our schedule. But it is precisely during this waiting that God works in our hearts, strengthening our faith and preparing us for what is to come. The vision may tarry, but the promise is clear. It will surely come. This is the time when our faith is refined like gold in the fire. Perhaps you are waiting for something, a healing, an answer, a significant change, and the wait seems endless. But remember, God is in control, and He knows the exact moment when His promises should manifest in your life. Faithful waiting on God also teaches us the importance of perseverance. Habakkuk encourages us not to give up, to continue trusting even when it seems that nothing is happening. It is an invitation to keep believing, to keep the flame of hope alive, knowing that God is faithful to fulfill His promises. During these moments, practices like prayer and fasting can be crucial in helping us maintain focus and trust in God. These acts of faith connect us to the power of the Holy Spirit, who gives us the strength to keep waiting, knowing that the vision will surely be fulfilled. How have you persevered in the wait, keeping your faith and hope firm in God? Moreover, waiting on God invites us to a deeper reflection on our relationship with Him. Often God uses these moments of waiting to teach us more about His nature and to draw us closer to Him. Perhaps in the rush to see the promises fulfilled, we lose sight of God's greater purpose for our lives. Waiting forces us to slow down, to seek God's presence more intentionally, and to understand that He is more interested in who we are becoming than in what we are achieving. Have you ever thought that during this wait, God is shaping your character, preparing you for something even greater than you can imagine? Habakkuk 2:3 also challenges us to trust in God's faithfulness, even when everything around us suggests otherwise. The vision may tarry, but it will never fail. This teaches us to live with unwavering confidence in God, knowing that His promises are yes and amen, and that He will never disappoint us. This confidence gives us the strength to face challenges with courage, knowing that in the end, the vision will be fulfilled exactly as God planned. So how have you responded to God's promises in your life? Are you willing to trust in God's faithfulness even when the wait seems long? Finally, Habakkuk 2:3 reminds us that God's timing does not adjust to our expectations, but to His perfect plan. This challenges us to align our expectations with God's will, learning to trust that He knows what is best for us. True faith is manifested in patience and in the trust that God is in control, even when we don't understand what He is doing. So how have you aligned your expectations with God's timing? Are you willing to wait faithfully, knowing that in the right time the vision will be fulfilled? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Habakkuk 2:3 has impacted your faith journey. Psalm 31:15, trust in God's sovereignty over our times. In Psalm 31:15, we find a powerful declaration of trust. My times are in your hand. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies and from those who persecute me. This verse is an affirmation of God's sovereignty over all aspects of our lives, from the major events to the small details. When David wrote these words, he was facing adversities and dangers, yet he trusted fully that his times were in God's hands. This deep trust is something that we are all called to develop, especially when facing uncertainties and challenges. Have you ever stopped to reflect on how much of your life is truly in God's hands? Trusting in God's sovereignty allows us to face difficulties with courage and serenity, knowing that our times, every moment, every decision, every event are under God's control gives us a sense of security that the world cannot offer. When we truly entrust our times to God, we are saying that we trust in His wisdom and His plan for our lives, even when we don't understand everything that is happening. It is a surrender that brings peace in the midst of chaos and confidence in the midst of doubt. How have you practiced this surrender, especially in the areas of your life where control seems to slip through your fingers? This psalm also reminds us that life is full of uncertainties, but the certainty that God is in control can guide us through the storms. When David spoke of his enemies and persecutors, he was referring not only to people, but to all the forces that try to lead us away from God's path. Today, our enemies may be financial worries, illnesses, complicated relationships, or even internal doubts. But just as David could declare that his times were in God's hands, trusting that He is capable of delivering us from any adverse situation. Have you ever thought about how this trust can change the way you face your daily challenges? God's sovereignty over our times also teaches us about the importance of living in the present, trusting that God is taking care of the future. Often we are tempted to worry excessively about what is to come, forgetting that the same God who sustains us today will be with us tomorrow. This trust frees us from anxiety and allows us to live each day to the fullest, knowing that God is in control. Perhaps you are worried about the future, your finances, your career, your relationships. Remember that by trusting your times to God, you are placing your future in the hands of the one who knows all things and who has the best for you. Psalm 31:15 also calls us to a posture of humility before God. Recognizing that our times are in His hands is to admit that we are not self-sufficient, that we need His guidance and protection. This humility draws us closer to God, allowing us to live with a healthy dependence on Him. Instead of trying to control everything, we can learn to rest in God, knowing that He has a divine purpose for every moment of our lives. How can this humility transform your life? Are you willing to let go of control and trust that God is taking care of every detail? Finally, this verse invites us to a life of continuous prayer and surrender. David not only declared that his times were in God's hands, but also asked to be delivered from his enemies. This teaches us that trust in God should be accompanied by a life of prayer, where we constantly surrender our challenges to Him, seeking His protection and direction. So how have you practiced this trust in God's sovereignty? Are you willing to place your times in His hands and trust that He has control over your life? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Psalm 31:15 has influenced your faith journey. Isaiah 55:8, the transcendence of God's thoughts and ways. Isaiah 55:8 confronts us with a truth that can be both challenging and comforting. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. This verse reminds us that God, in His infinite wisdom, operates in a way that is often beyond our understanding. Our thoughts and plans are limited by our finite vision, but God's are vast, perfect, and eternal. Sometimes we try to understand God's ways with our human logic, but Isaiah teaches us that there is a divine transcendence that we must accept with humility and faith. Have you ever wondered how your life could change if you stopped trying to understand everything and trusted more in God's thoughts and ways? Accepting that God's ways are higher than ours invites us to a posture of humility and dependence. When things don't go as we plan, it is easy to become frustrated or question God. However, Isaiah 55:8 challenges us to trust that God has a greater purpose, even when we cannot see the full picture. This trust frees us from the need for control and gives us the peace that comes from knowing that God is in charge. Imagine the relief of not having to understand every detail, but simply trusting that God's way is the best. How can this understanding change the way you approach challenges and make decisions? God's ways often lead us down unexpected paths. You may be waiting for an answer or direction that seems never to come, or perhaps you have experienced a twist in your life that seemed to be out of all your plans. However, it is important to remember that God sees what we do not see, and He works in a dimension that goes beyond our understanding. Instead of resisting the unknown, why not embrace the journey God has for you, knowing that He is leading you exactly where you need to be? This is an opportunity to live with unshakable trust in the divine plan. Isaiah 55:8 also teaches us about the importance of surrendering our plans to God's plans. In a world where we are encouraged to chart our own paths and seek the fulfillment of our dreams, it can be difficult to let go of our own plans. However, God invites us to trust that His plans are always better. This does not mean that we should stop dreaming or planning, but that we should be willing to submit our desires to God's will, knowing that He has a greater purpose for us. Are you willing to trust that even when your plans fail, God is designing something much greater and better? This verse also challenges us to live with a deeper faith, a faith that does not depend on understanding or seeing, but on trusting in God. True faith is what leads us to move forward, even when we do not know the full path. It is the faith that believes that God is working all things for our good, even when we do not understand how. This invites us to a complete surrender, where we live each day with the certainty that God knows what He is doing, and that His thoughts and ways, though different from ours, are always perfect. How can this trust in God's transcendence strengthen your faith and help you live with more peace and purpose? Finally, Isaiah 55:8 invites us to a life of worship and gratitude, even in the face of the unknown. When we recognize that God's thoughts and ways are higher, we are called to worship Him for His infinite wisdom and unconditional love. Even when life doesn't make sense to us, we can thank God for His sovereignty and trust that He is guiding all things according to His perfect plan. So how have you dealt with the moments when you don't understand God's ways? Are you willing to trust and worship even when life takes unexpected directions? Leave your answer in the comments below and share how Isaiah 55:8 has shaped your faith journey. John 7:6, divine timing versus human timing. In John 7:6, Jesus teaches us about the importance of discerning God's perfect timing. Then Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always ready." This passage reveals a profound truth about divine timing versus human timing. Jesus was aware that there was an exact moment for everything, and He did not allow Himself to be pressured by others to act outside of God's timing. While men are always ready to act according to their own agendas, Jesus shows us that God's timing is precise and sovereign. This invites us to reflect on how often we try to rush things while God calls us to wait for the right moment. Have you ever thought about how many times you tried to force something before God's time? The difference between divine timing and human timing is something that can bring us great peace if we choose to trust in God. Often we feel pressured to make quick decisions, whether due to external expectations or our own anxiety. However, just as Jesus knew that His time had not yet come, we too need to learn to recognize God's timing for our lives. This patience in waiting for the right moment is a demonstration of faith and trust in God, believing that He knows the best time for everything. How would your life be if you followed Jesus' example and resisted the pressure to act outside of divine timing? Life presents us with many situations where we want immediate answers. We want our prayers answered now, our problems resolved as quickly as possible. But John 7:6 reminds us that God has a plan and a perfect time for everything. Sometimes the wait can seem endless, and it is easy to give in to the temptation to act on our own. However, this passage teaches us that waiting on God's timing is always the best choice because He sees the full picture. Instead of acting hastily, why not trust that God is orchestrating everything for your good? Have you experienced the peace that comes from waiting on God's timing instead of following your own impulses? This verse also challenges us to resist the pressure of human expectations. Jesus did not allow Himself to be influenced by what others expected of Him. He was firmly focused on God's will. Similarly, we are often pressured to follow the rhythm of the world, to act according to the expectations of others, or to compare ourselves with the progress of others. But God calls us to a different rhythm, the rhythm of His perfect timing. When we choose to follow this rhythm, we experience a peace that the world cannot offer. How have you dealt with external pressures and human expectations? Are you willing to follow God's rhythm, trusting that His timing is always the best? John 7:6 invites us to a deeper reflection on patience and trust in God. Jesus, the Son of God, could have chosen to act according to His own desire, but He chose to wait on the Father's timing. This teaches us about the importance of submission to God's will, even when we feel ready to act. This submission is not weakness, but a demonstration of strength and faith. It is trusting that God knows what is best and that He will open the doors at the right time. How can this understanding change the way you approach your decisions and wait for God's answers? Finally, John 7:6 challenges us to live with unshakable confidence in God's timing. Knowing that there is a right time for everything allows us to rest in God, knowing that He is in control. We don't need to hurry or worry because God is orchestrating everything according to His perfect plan. So how have you discerned God's timing in your life? Are you willing to trust in divine timing? Even when things seem to be taking a long time, leave your answer in the comments below. Share how you have learned to trust in God's timing, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving teachings that will transform your life. Let's go together on this journey of faith and growth.